certainly do not and will not give protection to civil rights workers. In the first place, the FBI is not a police organization. It's purely an investigative organization, and the protection of individual citizens, either natives of the state or coming into the state, is a matter for the local authorities.
Welcome to Archival. I'm your host, Juanita Tolliver, and today I'm taking you into a set of archives that I never even truly expected to explore. Archives that were intimidating and deeply uncomfortable for me to research. Honestly, these archives were the most heartbreaking and draining to sift through because it revealed the damning and dangerous way that Black people in America were being surveilled and abused. I'm talking about the archives of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the Vault. This is Archival. While researching my book, A More Perfect Party, The Night Shirley Chisholm and Diahann Carroll Reshaped Politics, I never expected the FBI to serve as a primary source that would confirm the date, time, location, and even some of the attendees of Diahann Carroll's fundraiser for Shirley Chisholm's 1972 presidential campaign. What led me to the FBI archives in the first place was the fact that I had an understanding of the level of surveillance that the FBI conducted on civil rights leaders, Black activists, and Black organizers, including the Black Panther Party with COINTELPRO, the FBI counterintelligence program with the express intention of exposing, disrupting, misdirecting, and discrediting Black civil rights organizers and activists. Plus, I knew that J. Edgar Hoover, the long-serving FBI director, had an explicit loathing and disdain for the Black Panthers. In 1969, he described them as, quote, the top threat to U.S. security to the Washington Post. After reviewing a small portion of the FBI archives, I learned that federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies coordinated with a source and tracked Huey P. Newton, Barbara Lee, and their traveling party from Oakland, California to Los Angeles, California. One report shows that the source advised the FBI of Newton's plans to attend the fundraiser for Shirley Chisholm's presidential campaign, and they noted that the event was being hosted by Diahann Carroll and Flip Wilson. The source also included specific flight information for the trip, and another report flagged that the group missed their original flight to LA and even took a taxi to Diahann Carroll's house. Finding this information was a massive research win, but also a stomach-churning experience because it confirmed critical information for the story that I was telling in A More Perfect Party, and it emphasized the level of surveillance that Newton and the Black Panthers were experiencing. The weight of that cannot be ignored because it reflects the amount of pressure that J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, and his agents were inflicting not just on Newton, but other activists and organizers caught in Hoover's COINTELPRO vice. That was my introduction to the FBI archives. And after I finished writing A More Perfect Party, every once in a while, I would take a peek through some of the other files in the vault just to see what else was in there. That's when I saw the files entitled Mississippi Burning. The way that I gasped when I saw the file title, because I am familiar with the film starring Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman, but I had no idea that Mississippi Burning was the actual code name that the FBI used for the 1964 investigation into the disappearance and murders of James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. Now, as someone who had access to very serious movies well before I should have, I knew by watching the fictionalized investigation featured in Mississippi Burning as a kid that it was not the full truth. But also, being a kid, I was overwhelmed by the frames and narratives that it presented. Still, even back then, the way that the government was portrayed did not sit right with me. And watching it again as an adult was maddening. It was creative fiction, and I had to remind myself of that as the film made the FBI look like the good guys, like saviors even. Conversely, Black people were portrayed as passive background players, which was deeply harmful and startling. With all of this front of mind, I started digging into the Mississippi burning files, and I couldn't believe who the first investigators were to start searching for Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman in Mississippi. But now that I think about it, I shouldn't have been shocked at all. The Council of Federated Organizations, or COFO, included the NAACP, SNCC, and CORE, and they ran a tight check-in system in Mississippi. Volunteers only traveled in pairs or groups. When they arrived in a new city, they checked in at the nearest SNCC office. Travel plans were shared with offices across the state so that they knew when and whom to expect each day. Their protocol was for safety and for record keeping that enabled them to jump into action as soon as something felt off. On June 21st, Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman drove from Meridian, Mississippi to Neshoba County, Mississippi to visit the scorched remains of the Mount Zion Church, a church which had been burned down on June 16th after the congregation agreed to set up a freedom school and host voter registration drives for the community. Before leaving that morning, they'd communicated that they expected to return to Meridian by 4 p.m. After 5 hours of waiting, just in case the volunteers and civil rights workers had been delayed, FBI records confirmed that a COFO representative contacted the Lauderdale and Neshoba County jails to ask if they were holding the volunteers. They were told that no one fitting the descriptions that were given was being held, but the investigation ultimately confirmed that the three were being held at the Neshoba County Jail at the time of the call from the COFO representative. That was at 9 p.m. on June 21st. COFO was already searching for Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman. Black people were the first people on the ground leading the search, negating the behavior portrayed in the Mississippi Burning movie. At 10:15 p.m., a COFO representative contacted a special agent in Jackson, Mississippi to alert them to the vehicle Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman were driving, along with the timeline of their movements that day, and the lack of information from the police in the towns between Meridian and Philadelphia, Mississippi. This call was essentially COFO bringing the FBI up to speed, and it's documented in the FBI archives. The clarity of COFO's record keeping and quick outreach took my breath away. These organizers understood the gravity of the work that they were undertaking as they attempted to register Black people in Mississippi to vote. They knew that on any day, during any trip, they could be taken, beaten, or killed, something that was expressed to their staffers and volunteers during every training. What's more disheartening is that in reality, local law enforcement was involved in disappearing the three civil rights workers. The search continued the next day, and according to FBI records, at 3:20 p.m. on June 22, 1964, Hunter Morey, legal coordinator of COFO, contacted law enforcement to make an official request for an investigation to locate James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. And back in the primary training city, Oxford, Ohio, volunteers learned about the situation unfolding in Mississippi. Activist and author Cleveland Sellers documented the moment he heard about the disappearances in his book, The River of No Return. Sellers wrote, quote, "I sensed that something terrible had happened. After a long pause, Bob Moses told us what it was. Yesterday morning, 3 of our people left Meridian, Mississippi to investigate a church burning in Neshoba County. They haven't come back yet, and we haven't heard any word from them. We spoke to John Doerr in the Justice Department. He promised to order the FBI to act, but the local FBI still says that they have been given no authority." Sellers added that after Bob spoke, Rita Schwerner, Michael Schwerner's wife, walked on stage and shared the names of the missing. I cannot imagine the pain she felt saying her own husband's name, or the way the news struck the volunteers who were in training. But Sellers shares that the next day, 4 teams of SNCC volunteers were en route to Mississippi to retrace Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman's steps. The family hosting Sellers and his team was waiting for them and had prepared a meal of greens, cornbread, candied yams, and ham hocks. They shared that they believed the church had been burned and the volunteers had been killed because the church was working with COFO to register Black people to vote. They also questioned where the bodies had been buried. Even with this threatening reality, Sellers' host invited the volunteers to stay and search for as long as they wanted, expressing, quote, "We got everything set up for you." That setup also included 24-hour guards for the house. This is just additional evidence that Black people were not silently, passively watching these horrors unfold in their community. They were confronting them head on, unlike what was portrayed in the Mississippi Burning film. Remember how I mentioned that the FBI was presented like a savior entity in the movie Mississippi Burning? Well, archives from President Lyndon B. Johnson's presidential library paint a pretty callous picture of what went on behind the scenes. As I was probing President Johnson's and J. Edgar Hoover's responses to the missing 3 civil rights workers, I happened upon a series of phone recordings where they discussed not wanting to meet with the parents of Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman. In those calls, Hoover also presented a theory that the entire disappearance was a hoax. In this segment, you will hear clips of recorded conversations featuring President Johnson and Hoover as they navigate the news and the investigation. First, listen to how matter-of-factly Hoover spoke to Johnson after the FBI found the car that Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman were driving when they were disappeared. This call was recorded on June 23, 1964 at 4:05 p.m.
Mr. President, I wanted to let you know we found the car.
Yeah.
Now, this is not known, nobody knows this at all, but the car was burned, and we do not know yet whether any bodies are inside of the car because of the intense heat that still is in the area of the car. The license plates on the car are the same that was on the car that was in Philadelphia, Mississippi yesterday. And apparently this is off to the side of the road. It wasn't going toward Meridian, but is going in the opposite direction. Now, whether there anybody's in the car, we won't know until we can get into the car ourselves. We've got agents, of course, on the ground, and as soon as we get definite word, I'll, of course, get word to you. But I did want you to know that apparently what's happened, these men have been killed. Although, as I say, we can't tell whether anybody's in there in view of the intense heat.
Well, now, what would make you think they've been killed?
Because of the fact that it is the same car that they were in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And the same license number is on the outside of the car. Now, as I say, the heat is so intense you can't tell on the inside that everything's been burned, whether there are any charred bodies or not. It is merely an assumption that probably they were burned in the car. On the other hand, they may have been taken out and killed on the outside.
Or maybe kidnapped and locked up.
How's that?
Or maybe kidnapped and locked up.
Well, I would doubt whether those people down there would even give them that much of a break.
After hearing this for the first time, I was shocked at both how Hoover easily expressed that the men were dead with no hint of respect, sadness, or care in his tone, and how Johnson was actually holding out hope that they were still alive. Hoover effectively threw cold water on Johnson's hope and lacked basic humanity as he did so. In the next clip, President Johnson complains to White House Civil Rights Advisor Lee White about Congressman William Ryan and Congressman Ogden Reed, both of New York, pushing for a meeting between him and the parents of Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman. Let's just say that the president was less than enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with these parents. This call was recorded on June 23rd at 12:35 p.m. And the first voice you're going to hear will be President Johnson. Take a listen.
I find in myself that I think it's pretty dangerous that they'll overrun the White House, because anybody that wants a conference with the president, all they got to do is send his kid to Mississippi and then demand a conference with the president. And I think that's awfully bad precedent for the president to be seeing individual groups. I just think that every damn woman gets indicted will be wanting to see him, or everybody gets arrested will be wanting to see him. And no telling where we'll ever stop him. Congressmen will get to come in, get their picture made coming in out of the White House, and it'll just be hell.
In a bit of a pivot, after learning about the burning car, Johnson asked Hoover if he could step into a meeting with his civil rights advisor, Lee White, who was meeting with the families of Goodman and Schwerner at the White House. Here's what Hoover had to say.
This group's coming down here to see Lee White, my assistant.
Yes.
You think in the light of this that this congressman, both of them ways, and help me to see him, you think I ought to step in and just tell him I've talked to you and you're doing everything you can?
I think it would be all right. I don't like to have you having to see these people, because we're going to have more cases like this down south. And every time that it occurs, they're going to have these families come on here to Washington. And, of course, the congressmen, being politically minded, they'll want you to see them. Now, they've seen Katzenbach, as I understand, over here.
Yeah.
And politically, it might be wise for you to just step in and say that you've been in communication with the Bureau, somewhat along the statements that you issued this morning. Right. I wouldn't give the details of the number of agents that we've got. You said it was substantially augmented. And I think that's entirely sufficient. And that you're being kept advised of any progress that is being made.
That's good. Okay, thank you a lot.
Fine.
You let me know as soon as you're here.
Oh, yes, I'll call you, Mr. President.
I genuinely don't know if Johnson was suddenly motivated to meet with the families because he had news to share or what. But it felt strange hearing him ask Hoover about something that he seemed so sure of less than 4 hours earlier in the day. Also, it is abundantly clear in that clip that J. Edgar Hoover was running this show, and President Johnson was happy for the order that Hoover gave him, or, as he likely saw it, clear direction. The next day, June 24th, 1964 at 5:30 p.m., Hoover and Johnson's check-in took an even darker turn when Hoover shared a theory that the disappearance was a hoax.
That sheriff's a pretty bad fellow down there, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and we've been going over him pretty thoroughly. There are several theories that have been advanced, and of course we're running out all leads, some of them are cranks, but we are running out all of them. One is that this may have been done by these three fellows as in order to create an incident that would inflame the situation. The basis for that is that setting this car afire within sight of the highway, it was only a few feet off the highway, and burning it, leaving the license tags on the car, was not a thing a person would do who probably had committed a murder and had killed the three, but that the three fellows may have done it themselves. And there have been several reports, which we're running out down there, of two white men resembling these two of these three fellows, who were seen at an airport trying to board a plane going west to Los Angeles. That, of course, is one of these cases where people phone in and imagine that they've seen something, but we've got to run all of that out anyway. On the other hand, the thing that we lean strongly to is that these three may have gotten rather fresh in the
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
When they win.
Thank you. That's what, Edgar?
According to Cleveland Sellers' book, this hoax notion was appearing in, quote, local white newspapers. It was a harmful idea, but it is one that spread. That is, until Hoover went public with his belief that the civil rights workers were dead. He stated that he, quote, considers that they are dead during a press conference at the opening of the new FBI office in Jackson, Mississippi on July 10th, 1964. In that same press conference, Hoover also said this.
As we certainly do not and will not give protection to civil rights workers. In the first place, the FBI is not a police organization. It's purely an investigative organization, and the protection of individual citizens, either natives of the state or coming into the state, is a matter for the local authorities. The FBI will not participate in any such protection. The communists in this country had organized very intensely a drive to infiltrate into the racial discord and discontent in the country. And obviously that is being carried forth in every field of activity that the communists can find any fodder to feed on.
Listening to all of this, I'm not surprised, but I am still deeply horrified. Hoover had made it very clear that he believed that the Communist Party was a driving force behind the Civil Rights Movement, and he had a deep disdain for those he viewed to be influenced by the Communist Party. He said as much in a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on January 29, 1964, and the New York Times published his statements once the testimony was made public on April 22, 1964. Hoover lacked humanity for people because in his mind they were motivated by the Communist Party to register black people to vote, thus making their lives and their deaths something to be spoken of in a dismissive tone. It's almost as though he blamed them. I'm also horrified to see parallels to today. Voter disenfranchisement continues to play out, especially as we see a rise in the use of voter roll purging and redistricting as systematic voter suppression tactics, not to mention the use of state-sanctioned violence against citizens. All of this is a reminder that we are not that far away from 1964, in the sense that our basic rights are by no means guaranteed, and they require a fight if we want them to exist. Before we close out this episode, I want to share some of the research that nearly got left on the cutting room floor. It's time for my favorite segment, One Last Nugget, and this is a heartbreaking one. While combing through the Mississippi burning FBI records, I came across interview notes with Andrew Goodman's parents. Goodman left his parents in New York City on June 13, 1964. He went to Oxford, Ohio for the volunteer training program before continuing on to Meridian, Mississippi. When he arrived in Mississippi, he paused to write his parents a postcard, which was postmarked June 21st, 1964, p.m. According to the FBI archives, Andrew's parents received the postcard on June 24th, 1964, 3 days after he was killed. The postcard read, quote, "I have arrived safely in Meridian, Mississippi. This is a wonderful town, and the weather is fine. I wish you were here. The people in the city are wonderful, and our reception was very good. All my love, Andy." Thank you for watching Archival. This was a heartbreaking episode to research and produce, and a reminder of why I created this series, to excavate historical nuggets from the archives that shift entire narratives about what we think we know. Learning about how Black organizers and COFO volunteers were the first to search for Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman was illuminating. Also, hearing explicitly how J. Edgar Hoover and President Lyndon B. Johnson spoke about them behind closed doors was chilling, and it all presented an expanded understanding of what was. And that is critical. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, subscribe and rate Archival wherever you get your podcasts. Archival is a production of J. Tolliver Media, LLC.